Cycles render engine. Let's go ahead and switch that from Blender render to Cycles render. Okay, so if I switch this to the node editor here, as you can see down here in the node editor menu, we're using the material section of the node editor because that's what's pressed in here. And we are set to object materials because the little yellow cube is pressed. So whatever materials we make right now inside the node editor will be for whatever object we have selected, as opposed to, say, a material for our world environment, the background and such. Switch that back there. So if I double right click here to bring up my add menu, or you can just press Shift A under this shader menu here. In a previous video, we took a quick glance at some of these shader nodes here. So I mentioned how these shader nodes are similar to the options found in regular Blender render material in your main materials tab. So if I switch this over to Blender render and click on the material tab here and press new, so you've got your mirror, transparency, subsurface scattering, diffuse, and so on. So in the same way that in terms of whatever your material on your object is going to look like, really these first material settings here are your starting ground for what the whole shebang is going to look like once you get textures and images or whatever else on it. The same is true for the shader category of nodes, and that's why we're spending so much time on them to begin with. And indeed, if I switch this back to cycles render here, whatever shader nodes we add to the current material, which I added this while in Blender render, so it's not using nodes, but I can click use nodes here, and now we'll be able to. Whatever shader nodes from this category here under shader that we add to this material will be available to adjust in this menu where your normal options are for materials while you're in Blender render. There's actually 18 of these different shader nodes here, but 2 of them are basically just for mixing the other 16. So what we're going to do is run through all 16 of them real briefly. Okay, so I'm going to switch this back to the 3D view here. And so we've already got this basic cube with this material we added, which we actually added while we were in Blender render. So we had to make sure that use nodes was turned on for it. So to make sure this is a cycles material, just click under this surface category and make sure you see this diffuse options here. If not, you'll probably see a little button saying use nodes. And if you do see that, go ahead and press that, and that will convert this to a cycles material. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and just use this cube to create a table. So I'm going to press S to scale, middle mouse to constrain, and just bring it out like this. S to scale, middle mouse to constrain again to flatten it up some. S to scale, middle mouse to constrain to bring it out like this. Okay. And I'm just going to bring it up here. Press tab to go into edit mode. I'm going to press Shift W to do an edge loop cut here. Click and then click again to confirm that. Then press Shift W to do another edge loop cut going down vertically. Then I'm going to press space for face selection and select this bottom plane of this table here and press Shift E to do an inset face. And I'm just going to make it to where it's about like this. And then I'm going to click on this other one and press Shift R, which Shift R will repeat whatever your last action was. So our last action was pressing Shift E to inset these faces. So we can just click on the rest of these and press Shift R, and it will repeat the use of that tool with the exact settings that we used previously on the rest of these. So, okay, that's sweet there. Okay, so then we're going to hold Shift and select all of the new little faces we just created, and I'm going to switch my pivot point to individual origins, because if I were to scale this like this on medium point, which will scale towards the center of everything you happen to have selected, it will do like this, which is not what we want. So instead, we'll change this to individual origins, press S to scale, middle mouse to constrain so that they're not scaling any smaller horizontally, just vertically like this, to where we've got something similar to about a square here. Okay, so we've got these faces about the size I want, but I would like it if they were a little closer to the edge here. So what I'm going to do is hold C to bring up my circle paintbrush and just hold it down and press middle mouse over all the stuff I don't want selected, just a quick little way to select and deselect things there. And I'm going to press 5 to go into top view, Z to go into wireframe, and G to grab, middle mouse to constrain, and just bring these over to where they're a little bit closer to the edge here, and do the same thing for these guys here. And if I wanted to get these exactly the same, I could of course just add a mirror modifier and apply it, which wouldn't be too hard. We might as well go ahead and do that. So I'll shift scroll down, B to do a border select, X to delete everything on this left side here. If I press Z to go back into solid viewport shading, so we've got this half of the top of this table. So I could press tab to go back into object mode because we need to be in object mode if we're going to add a mirror modifier. And then I can just press Shift W, which is the hotkey to add a mirror modifier, and turn on clipping here. Press tab to go into edit mode. Press A to select everything, G to grab. Make sure this is all connecting here how it's supposed to. And that's good. Press tab to go back into object mode. Press apply. Now if we press tab to go back into edit mode, we have a perfectly symmetrical table here. And these nice small planes here from which to extrude legs for our table. So let's press E to extrude here. And then I'm going to press E to extrude and S to scale again. Notice that these are all scaling in towards their self rather than towards the center of this selection of faces as they would if we were using medium point. So now with this change to medium point rather than individual origins, if I press S to scale, that's what happens there, which is not what we want. So I'll switch this back to individual origins, S to scale, middle mouse to constrain to bring them in a little bit, and maybe the same thing on this side. Then I'll press E to extrude again. Let's press 1 to go in front view so we can line this up flat with the bottom of the ground here, which is this highlighted white grid line. Okay, so we don't need anything too fancy, just a simple little table here will do. Okay, so I think I want to bring in the edges of this table a little bit, so I'm going to press Z to go into wireframe and make sure I'm in vertex mode by pressing shift scroll down. I'm going to hold C to do my circle select and just select this side of vertex points, and then hold C and select this side. Press 3 to go into left view and go ahead and switch this back to medium point now. Press S to scale, middle mouse to constrain. And let's see, press Z to go back into solid viewport shading. I think I'll bring this table a little bit closer together too. So press 3 to go back into left, Z to go into wireframe, B to do a border select, and I'm going to press G to grab, middle mouse to constrain, bring this in some, and do the same over here. Yeah, that'll do there. Okay, so press tab to go back into object mode. So I've got this simple table here. I might go ahead and press T to bring up my tool shelf and maybe add a bevel. Maybe adjust the width of this bevel here, make it not so big there. Maybe add another bevel segment, just so I've got a nice little simple table here with rounded edges. So I'm going to press Shift A and under Mesh, add a circle here. Then I'm going to press Tab to go into Edit Mode and press F, which will turn the circle into a mesh by bridging all of these faces together. Press Tab to go back in Object Mode, S to scale this out, just so I've got this kind of nice round floor here. And maybe press W to add some smooth shading to it as well. Let's press 1 to go into front view, make sure that this table is sitting on here. Yeah, pretty good. And down here, I'm going to go ahead and rename this circle to floor. And rename this cube, which is this table we made, to table. And I'm also going to click this button here, the little mouse icon next to where it says floor, which will lock it. That means I can't accidentally click on it or grab the floor, because that's annoying. So what I'm going to do here is just create 8 monkey heads on this table, and then we're going to duplicate the table. That'll give us 16 monkey heads to deal with the 16 different main shaders we're going to be covering. Okay, so I'm going to right-click my cursor over here somewhere. And if it starts snapping to something you don't want it to, you can hold Alt and right-click to temporarily disable 3D snapping. Or of course you can disable it up here in the Builder menu. But anyway, I want to get this cursor over to the side of this table, so I can press Shift A and under Mesh, add a monkey. And tap W about 2 times to give it some smooth shading. Let's press 3 to go into left view. Let's scale this down maybe a little bit, R to rotate, and just have this setting up on this table here. Okay, that looks good. I'm gonna press G to grab, middle mouse to constrain so we can bring it over a bit and get a little more center on this table. Maybe scale it up just a tad and get it back flush with this line here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just duplicate this until we've got 8 of these. So I'm going to press D to duplicate, middle mouse to constrain, and just drag it straight out here. And then I'm going to hold Shift to select the first one and press D to duplicate these again, middle mouse to constrain, and bring it out to about here. Then Shift select the rest of these again, and we'll duplicate one more time. D to duplicate, middle mouse to constrain, and bring it out like this. Okay, so now we've got these 8 monkey heads, and so let's Click on the table, press tab to go into edit mode. Let's press Z to go into wireframe so we can quickly select this entire side of the table here. So I'm going to press B to do a border select. Click and drag over all these vertex points. Then press Z to go back into solid viewport shading, G to grab, and just extend this table to the length we need it to fit all these monkey heads on. And press tab to go back into object mode. It looks like the table is a little bit uncentered, so I'll just press G to grab, middle mouse to constrain, and get it to where these monkey heads are a little better positioned here. Okay, so we've got this first row, great. All we need to do now is duplicate this. So let's press B to do a border select and select the table and all the monkey heads. We'll press D to duplicate, middle mouse to constrain. Then I'm going to press 3 to go into left view, G to grab, and I'm going to bring this whole thing up a bit to about like this. Then I'm going to just select the table, press tab to go into edit mode, shift scroll down for vertex selection, which I was already in, Z to go into wireframe so we can quickly select through all of this rather than just these first few points, which would be what would happen if we were in this orthographic view and we press B to do a border select. So we press Z to go into wireframe to make sure that it selects everything through there. So we got all those selected, that's good. And then I'm going to bring these legs flush with the ground here where the other table is. All right, that'll do. Z to go back into solid viewport shading. Okay, so we've got this nice row of 16 monkey heads all ready to get shaded up. So we've mentioned before in the past that everything you see in Blender is composed of one of these 17 different editor types. Everything from this file menu up at the top, which is actually called the info editor. If we click on its little icon here, you could actually switch this editor from this info editor to any one of these other editor types, down to the outliner here, or properties panel. These are all just a collection of these different editors, and they can all be changed at any time by clicking on this button at the far left corner of their menu, with the exception of one or two special Sensei format editor types, which were created to combine functionality and unify what is called the workspace. Now, a workspace is just a collection of all these different editors arranged in a way that is useful. So by default in Sensei format, if we come up here where it says Blender, Sensei format uses 3 main workspaces. So one called Blender, which is the main workspace, and then one called Hacker, which is a workspace devoted to writing add-ons and adjusting code and things like that. And then also one called Shader, which is devoted entirely to getting the best out of the node editor, specifically for creating cycles materials. You can also toggle through these workspaces by pressing Control left or Control right, just a quick way to move between them. You can press this plus button up here to actually duplicate a workspace, and then, just switch it up however you want. So if I were to press plus on this Blender right now, and then we click this button to select through the different workspaces, here's this new one we just created. I could rename this one My Cool Workspace or whatever, and then adjust this however I wanted. Bring these down. You can mix and combine these different windows by clicking the little diagonal lines and dragging them over or towards. You could switch different editors and what have you. And so now I still have my default Blender workspace, but then I could also have this workspace here. Of course, if you were going to do that, you definitely would not want to do that in the middle of while you're working on a file. You would want to go to File, press New, start up a new file, and then start with a clean blank file there. Then create the workspace, set it up however you wanted. And then if you wanted to keep it, you would press File, Save Startup File here. So that's just a little more information about workspaces, but I'm going to go ahead and press X to delete that My Cool Workspace because I don't need it, and also it was terrible. But in this video, we're going to be covering the features of the Shader Workspace, which can help us more efficiently create cycles materials. So in the Shader Workspace here, first of all, we've got this outliner menu taking up this entire column here, which allows us to quickly select different objects or items contained within those objects. And then we have these two windows up here, which actually control the same camera view, and I'll explain why that is in just a minute. But notice that if we rotate the view in one of these cameras, or we hold shift and press middle mouse or zoom in and zoom out, that the camera for both windows moves exactly the same. So the point of this is whenever we do a render preview by pressing this button here, the same as we would do in the regular Blender workspace, is to have one window that will create the render preview, which gives us a better example of what our final render will look like. When we turn off the render preview while in the shader workspace, this actually keeps the last render preview up as though it were a rendered out image. Meanwhile, you have this window available to the left to continue working on the scene or do whatever adjustments you need to. And this is really great because it allows us to do all the editing of nodes and such down here in the node editor without slowing down moving of nodes, editing values and things like that. We still have this last render preview to look at so we can know how we want to adjust our nodes and so on down here. And because these cameras are exactly mimicked, if I were to change the view over here, say I wanted to get a close-up on something, as soon as I press the render preview button again, the camera will immediately begin rendering the location that I moved to from this view. Notice too that whenever we turn the render preview on, that this window changes from solid viewport shading to bounding box. And the point of that is to conserve resources while this test render is going. And by default in Sensei format, the test render samples are set to 0, which means this render will continue getting better for eternity until you turn off the render preview. Another really nice feature about this is that if you find that this is going too slow or you want to speed up the render preview going on in this window, you can click and drag this window over, which decreases the total size that has to be rendered. So this will speed up a bunch, or we can drag this back over here, or you can bring up the node editor here like this to make this window smaller as well. In either case, making it smaller will make the render preview work faster according to whatever your needs are. So I'll go ahead and turn that render preview off there. Finally, the third big advantage to having these cameras available here is that, say we were working on some materials or something, but we decided, you know what, I really want to do a regular render and render this whole image out here. We can press our render button and we'll be able to do an actual render if the render preview just isn't cutting it for us and we need an actual rendered image produced in the image editor, which we can of course immediately save to disk or edit or do whatever we need to. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and press go back here, which gets us back to the node editor. So one thing you may have noticed about the node editor here in the shader workspace, as opposed to opening up the node editor anywhere else, are these additional menu options here, which, as we just covered, let us do render previews, adjust lighting values, camera values, and give us access to render options and of course actually render. And so this is kind of the deal with Sensei format workspaces. When I first started creating workspaces and trying to figure out how to make things easier for myself, eventually I realized that I could use a little bit of coding to create special features and menus that unified the overall workspace, almost to the extent of each workspace being like its own program within a suite of programs. So sort of if you think of Adobe Creative Cloud, or previously it was Adobe Creative Suite, you have Illustrator, Photoshop, After Effects, and stuff like this, but these programs have a lot of cross compatibility and can work with each other. So in Sensei format, these workspaces are special in that they are, of course, similar to any other workspace found in Blender in that all of the panels are composed of these 17 different editor types, but Sensei format rubs an additional amount of polish on these workspaces to make them more cohesive and be more useful. And that's true in the Hacker workspace for coding, as well as the main Blender workspace, which we use most of the time. And so that's why I don't really recommend adjusting these default workspaces here in Sensei format too much, because they've been specially crafted as almost a suite of programs within Blender. But of course, like we mentioned earlier, you can always create your own workspace by pressing this plus button to duplicate whatever workspace you're on. You can rename it, change it up however you want, and experiment with that. Okay, so now that we have our scene all nice and set up, and we have a little bit of a better understanding about workspaces as well as editors and stuff like that, we're ready to dive into getting the basics down of these shader nodes. So stay tuned for that video coming up next, and thanks for watching.